Hello, pilots, and welcome back to another episode of Drone Chat. This is AJ. Very sorry for not posting in a very long time. No real excuses. Been working on updates to the app, working on other things, and honestly had to take a break to focus on some other projects. But I really would like to come back strong, and keep making these podcasts, talking about drone news, and just keeping you guys updated in the drone market, and putting a lot of energy into where to fly. So apologies again for not posting as much with really no explanation, but we're back and I'm gonna try and keep updated and stay more on schedule. So anyway, in today's episode of Drone Chat, I wanted to touch on a few things, just kind of some drone news in general. First of all, the FAA selecting 10 cities to do some drone projects, and what I think that means. And then second of all, kind of a deeper dive into looking at Uber Eats, who is going to be working in this pilot program with the FAA. So starting off here, it's come out, this is kind of like a week-old news at this point, but the FAA selected 10 cities for drone projects, basically a drone pilot program that would allow companies to start testing real autonomous drone projects. So these are projects that would allow for drone delivery. So, the stuff that Uber's talking about, the stuff that any sort of package delivery, UPS, Amazon, any of those companies that have been talking about autonomous drones for uses of delivery services, they were really running into a lot of problems before because of the FAA's rules where you can't fly over people, you can't fly over crowds, you can't fly beyond line of sight and all these things. That it basically made it was not feasible until now for these test programs. Basically what these test programs do is in like a certain area, obviously in controlled settings, these companies will be allowed to test, to prototype, and to basically collect information, data on what it's like to have drones flying beyond line of sight, delivering packages, and to see kind of if it's a feasible plan. So the whole idea here is for the private sector and the public sector, so government, local tribes, different, because this is all over across the United States, can work together to try and create, the future of maybe autonomous air travel, and see what that looks like. So starting down the list, there is the, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this. I'll just spell it out. The CHOCTAW Nation of Oklahoma. So this tribe is one of the selected 10 locations where they're going to try and build, some of this autonomous drone technology. Again, San Diego, the list goes on and on. Kansas Department of Transportation, Memphis, North Carolina Department of Transportation, Reno, Nevada, San Diego, University of Alaska, and if you want, you can just search up on the internet, on Google, anything that has to do with FAA approving autonomous drone flight in 10 cities, and you can get a much more comprehensive list. But I kind of wanted to not talk about like the specific locations, but just more interested. I was really surprised to hear this happening so quickly, because in all honesty, I didn't see this happening, like a kind of government sanctioned testing of autonomous air travel. I didn't see that happening personally for a couple years to come, and the fact that it's happening now is really interesting and leads me to believe that people who are saying we might see drone package delivery in the next 5 years, like that's really not that unreasonable. I would say also kind of within reason, probably in like test markets. So I could definitely see, if a lot of these pilot programs go, as planned or even exceed expectations, in the coming months and the following years, it's not that far of a stretch to imagine, the government in conjunction with a company like Amazon or Uber will launch a pilot program in a pilot market like San Francisco, for example, or like, Chicago, or, any kind of major metropolitan area. That would be kind of short flights. There's not a whole lot of, air traffic above San Francisco at low altitude, because obviously you have SFO and stuff like that. Those planes are not, the city of San Francisco is not right next to the airport, so you don't have problems with like airplanes coming in, right above skyscrapers. There's a cushion of airspace that could be used for, drone transportation for, packages. I think where it gets a lot more complicated and you actually start to get into the nuance of things is when you start to like see the legal issues. So who gets to decide, right, what airspace, who owns what airspace? And before that wasn't really that big of a deal because airplanes kind of fly above everyone, no one really cares. But then at what point, does a homeowner or does, a resident have a right to say they don't want a drone flying, right above their terrace, on the 50th floor of their skyscraper, right? I think that's kind of a very reasonable expectation, a very reasonable concern. And those are the things that I think will kind of slow down the actual implementation of any sort of pilot program in a test city anytime soon. Not to say we won't see it, I just see that as being a hurdle, like one of the bigger hurdles. So then moving on more specifically to Uber Eats and their particular, statements about this. This is actually coming from an article on Esquire called "Uber Eats is going to start delivering fast food by drone." And this article is a little bit critical of Uber's, Uber Eats in general, kind of poking fun at the fact that they're cyclists. Here, let me see if I can get a direct quote. If you're concerned about the ethics of asking underpaid cyclists to throw themselves into traffic to bring you a room temperature burger, Uber has a solution. And then they go on to describe how Uber's solution is this possibly other unethical solution of using drones to deliver packages to fly through cities. A kind of more critical article. I think they point out they have some good points in there. Definitely recommend giving it a read, giving it a look. But kind of like the same arguments that I think a lot of people would make of just when you get into the nitty-gritty logistics of drone delivery and seeing how that would really work, because it's not as cut and dry as, letting a drone take off in one place and land in another place. I mean, are we talking about landing on sidewalks? I don't think so. Are we talking about landing on rooftops? Maybe. Are there going to be designated areas for stuff to land? And then where does that happen? And like when you get into the nitty-gritty, like the practicality of it and the expense starts to get a little bit more nuanced and complicated, where maybe as using a truck, an autonomously driven vehicle, makes a little bit more sense because we already have a lot of that infrastructure. Then again, I do see the potential for the drone industry to innovate to the point where there is enough artificial intelligence to be super aware and to be able to, potentially have designated landing zones, and for package delivery by drone to just become a standard thing, just like seeing a car driving down the road. You aren't like, oh my gosh, like this thing could kill me. I mean, of course a car can kill you, can run you over just like that, and a human's behind it. So having a drone flying, through the sky to deliver your socks from Amazon sounds very futuristic, but in my opinion isn't really that far off from like an autonomous car, which we see right now. I mean, autonomous cars are being tested, especially in cities right now, like San Francisco. If you live in San Francisco, you'll see they always have engineers in the car, but there's autonomous cars being tested all the time. So to see drones being tested, very possible. That was kind of what I wanted to talk about on this episode of the podcast, or really just touch on, but I wanted to open up the discussion to all the pilots out there, to all the residents, to all the consumers or would-be customers of these services. Is this something that you're actually interested in? I know it's very buzzwordy, like drone delivery, autonomous drone delivery. It's all over the news. But as a consumer, or as a pilot, or as somebody who lives in a city that maybe would be a test city, is this something that you really want or could see yourself using, or is it more of like a fad or something that you just think is much more publicity and PR? Where I stand right now, I think at the moment it's a little bit of both. I see it more as kind of publicity, PR, but I could see, in the very near future, maybe next 5 years, it becoming something much more real, much more realistic, where I would take it much more seriously. But as it stands now, I see it in its very infant stages and think it's hard to come to any conclusions. But anyway, like I said, please let me know what your thoughts are. And also let me know if you have any suggestions for topics to discuss on the show, or suggestions for the app in general. I always say this at the end of the podcast, but feel free to reach out to me. You can do that through the Contact Us page on the Where to Fly app, or you can actually email me directly at aj@wheretoflyapp.com. I get that email directly in my inbox and respond to any email I get from pilot, whether it's critical of the app or has any feedback or is just complimentary. I really appreciate any feedback that I can get. So anyway, thanks again so much for listening, and I will catch you guys next time.